Chapter 3, Section 7 begins another level of Vera's education. Lopuhkov becomes ill. Vera is very concerned, and she spends every waking moment trying to nurse her beloved back to health. Eventually, she calls their mutual friend Kirsanov, who is studying to be a doctor. Kirsanov convinces the devoted Vera to spend a little bit of time resting and away from the patient, if only for her own good. She just has a hard time minding her own interests, even when her health is compromised. She puts others first. Her concern and devotion for her husband was putting her health at risk. Kirsanov finally convinces her to take a rest. Jack soon comes back to health. The three of them renew their friendship because Kirsanov had hardly visited the Lopuhkovs for over 2 years. We are left to wonder why these old friends had not been visiting one another. In Section 8, we are led to believe that Kirsanov and Lopuhkov are part of a new class of individuals, one that had hardly existed a generation ago. In just the same way, people of the type to which Lopuhkov and Kirsanov belong seem to be a type of people of a different sort. Each of them is a man of courage, unwavering and unyielding, capable of grappling with any task. This is one side of their character. On the other hand, each of them is a man of such irreproachable honesty that it never even occurred to us to ask, can this man be relied upon unconditionally? Of course he can be relied upon unconditionally. There were only a few scattered men of this character in the previous generation. Now there are more. This type quickly appeared quite recently, and now it's propagating quickly. These people couldn't even be found 6 years ago. 3 years ago they were despised, and now, but it doesn't really matter what people think of them now. They are the vanguard of moral virtue. They are honest and courageous. They have a carefully tuned moral compass, knowing right from wrong and how to effect it. Someday everyone will be of this type. Are they wise and prudent? I bet they are. This is the manly version of the human perfection, not all that different from Vera's. These men are headed for jobs in the bureaucracy or in communal economic activities, not in the rat race or in hedge funds. Those of us who have been through some relatively minor moral revolutions in the past decades know what Chernyshevsky is talking about here. A generation or so ago, no one would have imagined same-sex marriage, for instance. But then a new type of person arose who can recognize its apparent beauty. And these people make that apparent beauty the touchstone of their new morality. They fly flags of a rainbow variety to signify their goodness and competence and their withedness. Multiply this particular issue by many issues, and you can understand what Chernyshevsky is describing. A new type of human being has arisen. It is better. And Kirsanov and Lopuhkov are examples of it. As I say, Kirsanov has been avoiding Lopuhkov and Vera for 2 years. Why? Kirsanov is quite conscious about why he has been avoiding them. He has fallen in love with Vera, and he thinks it would be wrong to disrupt their marital happiness. He is a man of virtue. He respects his friend. He gradually avoids them in order to respect their marriage and encourage their fidelity. He does not try to steal Lopuhkov's girl. Instead, he denies himself. After Kirsanov and Vera nurse Lopuhkov back to health, one of Vera's employees comes for a visit. Her name is Krykukova, and Chernyshevsky relates her story in sections 14 and 15 of chapter 3. She had once been sick and morally obtuse. Kirsanov nursed her back to health, and Kirsanov engaged her in moral reform so that she no longer drinks or acts immodestly. She went from being a drunken whore to Kirsanov's girl. They started to live together. He taught her how to read. The girl is rapturous. What a feeling when the man you love is looking at you with delight. It's a joy that one can hardly imagine. Rather, the heart's beating evenly, pleasantly, softly. Your chest becomes brighter. You breathe more easily. When he looks at me and kisses me, I feel no shame. In any event, eventually, Kirsanov and the young woman grow apart. And when she comes back for a visit after her illness returns, he starts nursing her again. But it is not the same. It is this compassion love that the girl comes to talk to Vera about. As much as Kirsanov loved the young girl, she was no match for him because they were really no match for each other as far as their development was concerned. When he outgrew his youth, he could feel sorry for her, but no more. It was at this later stage of his development that he came to see Vera as his equal on the level of development. It is not that men and women must be complementary or have complementary characteristics, but rather that they must be on the same level of development. This is the new marriage. If it always seemed to Lopuhkov that he and Vera were on the same level of development, Kirsanov's absence began to worry Jack. Lopuhkov had not been able to see this worry, however, until Vera relates him a story about her third dream, which happens in section 19. In section 19, Vera is keeping a diary in her dream, and some angel or something keeps telling her to turn back the page further. At the end of her turning of the pages, she comes to recognize that she loved Lopuhkov for liberating her from the cellar, but perhaps not because he was for her. A liberator is rewarded with gratitude and devotion, but that's all. Beyond such respect is another need, a need for quiet, calm caresses, and the desire to doze blissfully in a sea of tenderness. Does he share this need? Are our natures and needs really compatible? He's prepared to die for me, and I for him. But is that enough? Lopuhkov, you see, is rather cold, as befits a materialist. Kirsanov is warmer and more compassionate, as the episode with his young girlfriend demonstrates. Because Vera is perfectly honest, she eventually shares the content of this dream with Lopuhkov, though she seeks to deny the obvious importance of the dream. She finally comes into Lopuhkov's room and sees him in front of one of his letters from Robert Owen. She tells him of the dream. Lopuhkov reacts with great love for her, but not with possessiveness. He begins to reflect on his shortcomings and on Vera's needs. Lopuhkov starts to ask himself a question. Why has Kirsanov been avoiding the happy couple? He goes and visits Kirsanov and demands that he begin his visits anew. This conversation between two old friends turns to the topic of marriage. It is never wrong to deny a desire because that only increases the need enormously, mentions Kirsanov. Then Lopuhkov continues. You and I know that there all come a time when all the needs of every man's nature will be completely satisfied. But we also know full well that that time has not yet come. For the present, a reasonable person is content if he can live comfortably, even if not all the sides of his nature are nurtured by that very situation in which he so comfortably lives. Lopuhkov recognizes at this point that he can no longer provide all of Vera's needs, including her need for emotional closeness, or perhaps for sexual completion. Lopuhkov seems rather unerotic fellow, after all. For all her respect for Lopuhkov, Vera is coming to recognize that her dream was spot on. There is something missing in his relationship with her. It is certain that Kirsanov can give her everything that Lopuhkov can, and more. Does this mean that Kirsanov is on a higher level of development than Lopuhkov? Does it mean that Vera has not yet developed as far as she must? These and other questions await a further treatment of Book 3. It is the longest of the books, and the one where most of the plot unfolds. It requires another video. We will soon be returning to the prequel to this book, the mysterious suicide with which our narrative began.